Early relationship and ventures of Rizal. Jose Protasio Rizal Mercado y Alonso Realonda's life is one of the most documented of the 19th century due to the vast and extensive records written by and about him. Almost everything in his short life is recorded somewhere, being himself a regular diarist and a prolific letter writer. Much of the materials having survived, his biographers, however, have faced difficulty in translating his writings because of Rizal's habit of switching from one language to another. Now, they drew largely from his travel diaries with their insights of a young Asian encountering the West for the first time. They included his later trips home and back again to Europe, to Japan and United States, and finally through his self-imposed exile in Hong Kong. During December 1891 to June 1892, Rizal lived with his family in number 2 Rednalexia Terrace, Mid-Levels, Hong Kong Island. Rizal used the 5 de Aguilar Street, Central District, Hong Kong Island as his ophthalmologist clinic from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. No. This period of his education and his frenetic pursuit of life included his recorded affections, which 9 were identified. They were Gertrude Beckett of Chalcot, Christendom, a wealthy and a high-minded Nelly Busted of the English and Iberian merchant family, last descendant of a noble Japanese family, Seiko Usui, or Seiko Yusui, affectionately called Osesa. His early friendship with Segunda Katigbak, Leonor Valenzuela, and 8-year romantic relationship with a distant cousin, Leonor Rivera. No, shortly after he graduated from the Ateneo Municipal de Manila, now Ateneo de Manila University, Rizal, who was then 16 years old, and a friend, Mariano Katigbak, came to visit Rizal's maternal grandmother in Tondo, in Manila. Mariano brought along his sister, Segunda Katigbak, and then a 14-year-old Batangueña from Lipa, Batangas. Yung mga alae, yung mga ganon. No. It was the first time they met, and Rizal described Segunda. How did he describe Segunda? No, let me read for you. A rather short, with eyes that were eloquent and ardent at times, and languid at others, with a rosy cheek, with an enchanting and provocative smile that revealed very beautiful teeth, and in the air of self. Her entire self diffused a mysterious charm. Now, this make his grandmother's guests were mostly college students, and they knew that Rizal had skills in painting. So they suggested that Rizal should make a portrait of Segunda. He complied reluctantly and made a pencil sketch of her. And may question na kasi kung sino yon. Unfortunately, Katigbak was engaged to Manuel Luz. Now, these are the trips of Rizal. From Philippines, he goes to France, Germany, back to the Philippines, Hong Kong, Japan, United States of America, France, Germany, Spain, Germany, Hong Kong. He did pass by Malaysia and back to the Philippines. Okay. Now let's talk about Rizal's love life. Now, this was Julia. How Rizal, or how could we describe Julia? Julia was only 15 when he first saw Julia by accident in a river in Los Baños, a few days after Esther in 1877. She was wearing a red wrap. Huh? That's Julia. She was wearing a red wrap around skirt. Julia could not catch the butterfly she was chasing. Rizal, ever gallant, caught two. And that's how Trilliana wrote. So heart beating with strained fondness, Rizal offered her the butterflies. And she laughed with an innocent pleasure. He was instantly attracted to her, but for lack of subsequent contact, Rizal eventually forgot Julia, whose surname was never known. Next is Segunda Katigbak. Segunda Katigbak, a charming girl from Lipa, Batangas. She was his puppy love, according to Trilliana. Unfortunately, his first love was engaged to married to a townmate, Manuel Luz. Next is Leonor Valenzuela. Now, who's Leonor Valenzuela? After his admiration for a short girl in the person of Segunda, then came Leonor Valenzuela. From a short girl to a tall girl from Pagsanhan. So Rizal sent her love notes written in invisible ink that could only be deciphered over the warmth of the lamp or a candle. He visited her on the eve of his departure to Spain and bade her a last goodbye. Just imagine how difficult it is for Rizal. In his first travel, he has to leave Leonor Valenzuela. Next is Leonor Rivera. Ganda ba si Leonor Rivera? Okay. Almost simultaneously, Rizal was meeting another Leonor. There are two Leonor. What's the first one? Leonor Valenzuela and Leonor Rivera. So the girl, Leonor Rivera, will be his girlfriend for the next 11 years. The two were distant cousins. Rivera was to him his ideal woman, his model for Maria Clara, one of the main characters in his first novel, Noli Me Tangere. He was actually ready to marry her. Unfortunately, Rivera's mother disliked Rizal, who was then earning the reputation of being dissident. The two last saw each other before Rizal left for Spain in May 1882. The mother hid from Rivera all the letters that Rizal was sending from Spain. After a passage of many years, thinking that Rizal had abandoned her, Rivera sadly consented to marry Henry Keeping, an Englishman who was her mother's choice. Rizal was said to have cried shamelessly when news of the wedding reached him. Rivera never got to know that Rizal loved her just as much as he thought of her prevented him from having a serious relationship with any other woman he encountered in Europe, like Ortiga, Biquet, Bosted, and Jacobi. Let's talk about Consuelo Ortiga. Thanks to Inquirer.net for the picture. So Rizal met Consuelo Ortiga Irey, the prettier of Don Pablos Ortiga's two daughters, in Madrid. She fell in love with him after only a few days. She must be beautiful. He dedicated to her A la Señorita, C-O-Y-R, which became one of his best poems. The Ortega's residence in Madrid was frequented by Rizal and his compatriots. He probably fell in love with her, and Consuelo apparently asked her for romantic verses. He suddenly backed out before the relationship turned into serious romance because he wanted to remain loyal to Leonor Rivera, who's still in the Philippines. And he did not want to destroy his friendship with Eduardo Delete, who was also madly in love with Consuelo. So, now another one is Gertrude Bracken. Okay. Now, while Rizal was in London, annotating the sucesos de las Islas Filipinas, he boarded in the house of the Biquet family within walking distance of the British Museum. Now, Gertrude, a blue-eyed and a buxom girl, was the oldest of the three Biquet daughters. She fell in love with Rizal. Tutti helped him in his painting and sculpture. So that's how her nickname, no? Tutti. But Rizal suddenly left London for Paris to avoid Gertrude, who was seriously in love with him. Talagang pambansang bayani natin. Before leaving London, he was able to finish the group curving of the Biquet sisters. He gave the group curving to Gertrude as a sign of their brief relationship. Next is Nelly Bosted. Who is Nelly Bosted? Rizal, having lost Leonor Rivera, sakit, no? Ang pag-ibig na hindi natuloy because someone kept the letter secret. No. But anyway, Rizal was entertained the thought of courting other ladies. While a guest of the Bosted family at the residence in the resort city of Biarritz, he had befriended the two pretty daughters of his host, Eduardo Bosted. Rizal used to fence with the sisters at the studio of Juan Luna. Antonio Luna, Juan's brother and also a frequent visitor of the Bosteds, courted Nelly, but she was deeply infatuated with Rizal. In a party held by Filipinos in Madrid, a drunken Antonio Luna uttered several remarks against Nelly Bosted, and that prompted Rizal to a challenge Luna into a duel. Fortunately, Luna apologized to Rizal, thus averting a tragedy for the compatriots. Their love affair unfortunately did not end in marriage. It failed because Rizal refused to be converted to Protestant faith. So Nelly is a Protestant. Nelly demanded, and Nelly's mother did not like a physician without enough paying clientele to be a son-in-law. So the lovers, however, parted as good friends when Rizal left Europe. Next is Jose. So on his second trip to Europe in 1888, Rizal stopped by Japan, where he met Jose, a lovely and intelligent daughter of a samurai. If all he wanted was a good life, he would have married Osesa and stayed on in Japan because a Spanish delegation there was offering in him a well-paying job. But he left Japan. Why? Because he thought he has destined for a greater task in the Philippines and had to go home. In a letter, he said of her, Ose-san, sayonara. No woman like you has ever loved me. Now another lady is Suzanne Jacobi. In 1890, Rizal moved to Brussels because of the high cost of living in Paris. So in Brussels, he lived in the boarding house of the two Jacobi sisters. In time, they fell deeply in love with each other. Suzanne cried when Rizal left Brussels and brought him when he was in Madrid. Another is Josephine Bracken. While in exile in the Pitan, in Zamboanga, in early February 1895, Rizal met an 18-year-old petite Irish girl with bold blue eyes, brown hair, and a happy disposition. She was Josephine Bracken, the adopted daughter of George Taufer, who had traveled to the Pitan from Hong Kong to have his eye treated by Rizal, because Rizal is known as an ophthalmologist. He called her Dulce Extranjera, or sweet foreigner. So the loneliness and boredom of exile may have taken its toll as he found himself falling in love quite easily. However, Rizal's sisters suspected Josephine of being a spy for the Spanish authorities and a threat to his security. Rizal asked Josephine to marry him, but she was not yet ready to make a decision due to her responsibility to the blind Taufer. Since Taufer's blindness was untreatable, he left for Hong Kong on March 1895. Josephine stayed with Rizal's family in Manila. Upon her return to the Pitan, Rizal tried to arrange with Father Antonio Covach for their marriage. However, the priest wanted a retraction as a precondition before marrying them. Rizal, upon the advice of his family and friends, and with Josephine's consent, took her as his wife even without the church blessings. So Josephine later gave birth prematurely to a stillborn baby, a result of some incidents which might have shocked or frightened her. That's all, folks, about Rizal's life.